The janitor had always been a quiet man. He walked the long hallways of the tall office building every night, mopping the floors, emptying the trash cans, and making sure everything was in order before the next day began. Most of the time, people hardly noticed him. He was just another face in the background, someone who kept things clean but never drew attention to himself. But behind that quiet exterior, he carried a story that no one knew. He was a single dad. Every day, he balanced work with taking care of his child, who was the most important person in his life. Their little apartment was small, but it was filled with warmth, laughter, and the smells of home-cooked meals. The janitor had learned early on that life was not always fair, and he had to work twice as hard to make sure his child had everything they needed. Bills, rent, and groceries were always on his mind, but he never let it show. He wanted to make their world a place of comfort and love, even if it meant sacrificing his own dreams. One thing most people didn't know about him was his love for music. As a child, he had spent hours at the piano, his fingers flying over the keys as melodies filled the room. Music had always been his escape, a place where he could forget the hardships of life and feel free. But as time went on, responsibilities took over. Life became about survival and making ends meet, and the piano was pushed aside, gathering dust in the corner of a small room. Still, the love for it never left him. Every now and then, he would hum a tune or tap out a rhythm quietly, keeping the music alive in his heart. Nights at the office building were long and often lonely, but the janitor found a strange sense of peace in them. The quiet hum of the lights, the echo of his footsteps on the polished floors, and the soft rustle of paper in empty offices created a rhythm that reminded him of music. Sometimes, when the building was completely still, he would linger by the piano in the lobby. It was an old instrument, one that no one played seriously anymore. Most people saw it as decoration, but to him it was a treasure. He would place his hands lightly on the keys and let the memories of songs from his childhood flow through him. No one ever watched, no one ever judged. It was just him and the piano, and in those moments he felt truly alive. Despite the quiet life he led, he had a spark in him that could not be dimmed. He was gentle, patient, and kind, always ready with a smile or a helping hand for anyone he met. The building staff and cleaning team liked him for his calm presence. Even if they didn't know much about him, he never spoke about his past or his struggles. He didn't need to. His life was about action, not words, and his dedication to his work and his child spoke louder than anything he could say. At home, his child would often ask him to tell stories about his life before he became a janitor. He would laugh softly, telling small anecdotes about childhood adventures, lessons learned, and dreams he once had. He never complained, never expressed regret. He simply shared these memories in a way that was warm and honest. His child loved these moments, seeing the strength and resilience behind their father's quiet demeanor. They didn't realize it yet, but that same strength would soon lead to a moment that neither of them would ever forget. The janitor's daily routine rarely changed. Wake up early, prepare breakfast, drop his child at school, work long hours cleaning offices, and then return home to prepare dinner and help with homework. It was a simple life, predictable but secure. Still, there was an underlying sadness in him, a quiet longing for something more. He missed the days when he could sit at the piano for hours without worrying about bills or responsibilities. Music had always been his dream, his passion, and though life had diverted his path, it never erased that desire. One night, after finishing his rounds, he found himself standing by the piano in the lobby once more. The building was silent, except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. He placed his hands on the keys and hesitated. The familiar feeling returned immediately. The thrill, the joy, and the comfort of creating something beautiful. He closed his eyes and let his fingers move, letting the music pour out of him as if it had been waiting all these years to be heard again. For a moment, the world outside disappeared, and it was just him, the piano, and the melodies that had never left his soul. Little did he know, this simple act, a quiet performance in an empty lobby, would soon become the beginning of something extraordinary. Life had a way of surprising even those who had long stopped expecting it. And in the weeks to come, the janitor would face a moment that would change how everyone saw him, a moment where his hidden talent would shine, and the world around him would finally take notice of the man who had lived quietly in the shadows for so long. The next week brought something unexpected to the building. There was a corporate event planned, a gathering where the CEO and top managers would meet, along with some clients. The janitor continued his usual routine, quietly cleaning and moving through the halls, barely noticing the hustle and bustle around him. But that day, there was something in the air, a sense of excitement that made even the night quiet feel different. As he mopped the main lobby, a few employees noticed him and smirked. They had seen him at the piano before, lingering there after his rounds, and a mischievous idea formed. One of them, laughing quietly, said, "Hey, why don't you ask him to play something for the event? It would be hilarious." The others nodded, snickering, imagining a small joke performance. They had no idea about his talent. They only saw the janitor, the quiet man who worked nights and never spoke much. Soon, the whispers spread. "Maybe he can play a little tune for the CEO?" someone suggested, and laughter followed. The idea was presented as a casual joke, a light-hearted moment for the event. The janitor overheard the suggestion but did not react immediately. He paused in his cleaning, feeling a mixture of nerves and surprise. He had never been asked to perform in front of anyone before, especially not executives. It felt absurd and almost unfair, like he had been put on the spot for someone else's amusement. That evening, as the event began, the janitor was approached by a few of the employees who insisted he should play the piano for a few minutes. They laughed as they said it, thinking it would be funny to watch him fumble through something simple. The janitor hesitated, his heart beating faster. This was not something he had expected, not something he had prepared for. But then he thought of his child, the one who always encouraged him to never give up, to keep chasing the small sparks of happiness in life. He took a deep breath and agreed quietly, saying yes. The employees led him to the lobby where the piano stood, polished and ready. The event attendees were gathering, some looking curious, others unaware of what was about to happen. The janitor felt his hands shake slightly, the familiar nervousness creeping in. He glanced at the piano, its keys gleaming under the soft lights, and felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement. This was a moment unlike any he had ever faced. He knew it could go badly, that he could be laughed at, but he also knew that he had the music inside him waiting to come out. He sat on the piano bench, adjusting his posture and letting his fingers hover above the keys. A few employees snickered behind him, whispering to one another, imagining a performance that would end in embarrassment. But the janitor closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, and let the memories of playing fill his mind. He remembered the hours spent practicing as a child, the melodies that had once poured effortlessly from his fingers, and the joy it had brought him. That joy was still there, waiting quietly for this exact moment. As the first notes touched the air, the room fell silent. At first, it was soft, almost hesitant, as if testing the space and the listeners. But then, slowly, the music began to grow. It was rich, warm, and full of emotion. The janitor's hands moved with confidence, recalling patterns and chords he hadn't played in years. Every note seemed to resonate not just through the room, but through the hearts of those listening. The sound was beautiful, unexpected, and unlike anything anyone anticipated from the man they had always overlooked. People at the event stopped what they were doing. Conversations faded, and the laughter that had been planned as a joke disappeared. Eyes turned toward the piano, watching the janitor, the quiet janitor who had suddenly transformed the room with something magical. The CEO, standing near the back, paused mid-conversation, his attention fully captured. He had heard many performances in his life, but there was something authentic, raw, and moving about this one. The music was not just technically impressive. It carried a story, a depth of feeling that touched everyone present. The janitor, lost in the moment, did not see the reactions around him. He played from the heart, letting the music flow freely. Each chord and melody seemed to tell a story of perseverance, of quiet struggle, of a life lived with care and love. It was as if all the years of hard work, the long nights cleaning, and the sacrifices made for his child were now being expressed through sound. He was no longer just a janitor. He was a storyteller, a musician, and a man who had finally allowed his passion to shine. By the time the last note faded, there was a stunned silence. No one moved. No one spoke, as if everyone needed a moment to process what had just happened. Then, slowly, applause began, soft at first, then growing louder. People were clapping not just out of politeness, but out of genuine admiration. The employees who had thought this would be a joke looked at each other in shock, realizing that they had completely underestimated him. The CEO stepped forward, tears forming in his eyes, moved by the beauty and sincerity of the performance. He shook the janitor's hand, expressing heartfelt admiration. "I had no idea you could play like that," he said, his voice filled with respect. "That was extraordinary." The janitor smiled quietly, a little embarrassed but deeply satisfied. He had faced a challenge that seemed daunting and had turned it into a moment of triumph, not just for himself but for everyone who witnessed it. As the evening continued, the janitor returned to his duties, but things had changed. People no longer saw him as just a quiet figure in the background. They looked at him with newfound respect and curiosity. Some asked him to play again, while others simply watched in awe. The event had turned into something unexpected, a celebration of hidden talent and the reminder that everyone has something special within them, waiting for the right moment to shine. That night, as he walked home, the janitor reflected on what had happened. He felt a mixture of pride, humility, and excitement. Life had given him a chance to show a side of himself that had long been hidden, and he had taken it. He knew that this was only the beginning, that there would be more opportunities, more moments where his music could touch others. But for now, he was content, knowing that he had faced a challenge, embraced it, and turned what was meant to be a joke into something beautiful and unforgettable. The next morning, the janitor returned to work with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation still lingering in his mind. The previous night's event had left a deep impression on him, but he could not ignore the uncertainty that now accompanied his routine. The employees who had suggested he play were watching him differently, some with curiosity, others with a subtle hint of respect. The atmosphere in the building felt charged, as if everyone sensed that something had shifted. As he walked through the familiar hallways, he could hear whispers behind closed doors. People were talking about his performance, about the way he had taken a simple piano and transformed it into something extraordinary. At first, he felt a little embarrassed, uncomfortable with the attention, but soon he realized that this was not about him alone. It was about the music, about the story it told, and the way it had touched everyone present. The janitor paused near the piano in the lobby. His hands rested on the polished wood, and he remembered the moment when he first agreed to play. He could still feel the nervous tension, the fear of being judged, and the uncertainty that had weighed on him. Yet, when he had begun to play, all of that had vanished. It was as if the piano had become an extension of himself, translating his emotions into sound. Later that day, a few of the employees approached him with a mix of excitement and apprehension. "We were thinking," one of them began, "maybe you could play again at the next event. People really loved it." They spoke quickly, unsure of how he would respond. The janitor smiled quietly, appreciating the offer but also feeling the weight of the responsibility. This was not about performing for praise or recognition. It was about connecting with people through music, something that came from his heart. Word of his talent spread quickly. By mid-afternoon, even the CEO had heard about the performance and requested a meeting. The janitor was called into the office, a place he rarely entered, and found himself face to face with the person who had unknowingly witnessed his first real performance in front of a crowd. The CEO was composed but visibly moved, a sign that the music had left a lasting impression. "You have a gift," the CEO said simply, his voice calm but sincere. "I've seen many performers, but there is something special about how you play. You tell a story without words, and that is rare." The janitor nodded, feeling a mix of pride and humility. He knew that this moment was not about ego. It was about opportunity, about finding a place where his passion could be shared without fear or judgment. As the day went on, the janitor found himself thinking more and more about the piano. He had spent years setting aside his dreams to focus on work and family, but now it felt as though the universe had handed him a chance to reconnect with what he loved most. The thought of performing again, of expressing himself through music, filled him with a sense of purpose that he had not felt in years. That evening, he returned to the lobby after his cleaning rounds. The piano seemed to call to him, each key a reminder of the melodies that had once filled his life. He placed his fingers on the keys, tentative at first, and began to play. The notes flowed softly, hesitantly at first, and then with growing confidence. As he played, he felt the familiar joy that had always accompanied his music. It was a private moment, just for him, yet he knew that it was also a rehearsal for what was to come. Meanwhile, employees and visitors began to notice him. They paused to listen, drawn in by the unexpected sound. The janitor did not mind their presence. He welcomed it. The music was no longer just a personal escape. It was becoming a bridge between himself and the world around him. Each note seemed to reach out, touching hearts and stirring emotions that words could not express. The janitor's child often reminded him of the power of encouragement. Those small words of support, whispered during bedtime or spoken over breakfast, had given him the courage to take a step into the unknown. Now, as he played, he felt that same courage flowing through him, pushing aside doubt and fear. The music became a statement, a declaration that talent and passion could not be hidden forever. By the end of the evening, the janitor had played for over an hour. He had explored melodies from his past, improvised new ones, and allowed his emotions to guide every movement of his fingers. The lobby, usually empty and quiet at night, had been transformed into a space of warmth, reflection, and shared humanity. People who had stopped by to pass through found themselves lingering, listening, and feeling a connection that transcended their daily routines. The janitor cleaned the piano gently afterward, his hands moving with care and respect. It was not just an instrument to him. It was a partner, a companion that had shared his life's highs and lows. He left the lobby that night feeling a sense of fulfillment that work alone could never provide. The music had reminded him of who he was, of the joy that still existed in his life, and of the possibilities that lay ahead. Over the next few days, preparations began for another corporate event. This time, the janitor was formally invited to play. There was no mockery, no expectation of failure. People wanted to see him, to hear him, and to experience the same emotion that had moved everyone before. The anticipation was palpable, and the janitor felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He knew this was his moment to shine, to share not just music but a piece of his heart. As he arrived for the event, he noticed the subtle changes in the environment. Employees greeted him with smiles, some offering quiet words of encouragement. The janitor realized that the perception of him had shifted dramatically. No longer just the quiet janitor, he had become a figure of intrigue and admiration. This was a new chapter in his life, one that he could shape with every note he played. He took a deep breath as he approached the piano. The keys gleamed under the lights, familiar and comforting. He allowed himself a moment to pause, reflecting on the journey that had led him here. From the quiet nights spent cleaning floors to the private moments at the piano, every experience had built toward this opportunity. The janitor understood that while the world had often overlooked him, his dedication, patience, and love for his craft had never gone unnoticed by the one person who mattered most, himself. The room filled with guests, the hum of conversation fading as people realized that something special was about to happen. The janitor seated himself at the piano, his fingers hovering above the keys. He felt the familiar tension, the flutter of nerves, but also a deep sense of calm. This was not just a performance. It was a chance to connect, to share, and to be seen in a way he had never been before. As the first notes echoed through the space, silence settled over the room. Eyes turned toward him, ears attentive, hearts open. The janitor let the music guide him, letting go of fear and doubt, allowing every emotion he had held inside to flow freely through the instrument. The lobby transformed once again, this time filled with warmth, wonder, and the unmistakable magic that happens when talent and passion meet opportunity. The day of the performance arrived, and the janitor could feel the excitement in the air. The building was decorated for the corporate event, lights shining softly and a gentle buzz of conversation filling the lobby. For the janitor, however, everything outside the piano seemed to fade away. This moment belonged to him and the music, and he felt the weight of that responsibility settle comfortably on his shoulders. As he approached the piano, he noticed a crowd beginning to gather. Employees, clients, and even some of the building staff who rarely attended such events were standing nearby, their eyes curious and expectant. Some whispered to each other, recalling the previous night when a quiet janitor had amazed everyone with his skill. There was no laughter this time, no jokes. This was serious, and everyone seemed eager to witness what they had only heard about before. The janitor took a deep breath and sat down at the piano. His fingers hovered above the keys for a moment, feeling the smooth surface beneath them. The memories of years spent practicing returned, guiding his hands. He let the nervousness settle into calm focus, aware that every note he played would tell a story of dedication, passion, and quiet resilience. He closed his eyes and let the first note sound, soft and tentative, filling the room with its presence. At first, people listened quietly, unsure of what to expect. Then, as the melody unfolded, they realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. The janitor's hands moved with precision and grace, fingers dancing across the keys with a combination of technical skill and emotional depth. Every chord seemed to resonate, reaching into the hearts of those listening. The music was not just sound. It was a living, breathing expression of his journey, of all the struggles and triumphs that had shaped him. The CEO, standing a few feet away, watched intently. Normally composed and reserved, even he seemed captivated, unable to look away. The music touched something deep within, evoking memories, emotions, and a sense of shared humanity. For the janitor, the audience was present but not overwhelming. He played as if he were alone in his room, the piano translating every feeling into a language everyone could understand. As the performance continued, people began to react. Eyes glistened with tears, breaths were held in anticipation, and hands unconsciously reached out to feel the vibrations of the piano through the floor. It was not just talent that amazed them. It was the honesty of the music, the way it spoke of a life lived with care, humility, and unspoken strength. Laughter and chatter were replaced by silence, replaced by the awe that comes when someone surpasses every expectation. The janitor did not rush. Each piece he played was deliberate, every pause meaningful. He explored melodies that were both familiar and new, blending memories with improvisation. It was as if the piano had become a voice for all the emotions he had kept hidden for years. People leaned in, listening closely, some wiping tears from their eyes, others simply absorbing the beauty of what they were hearing. The room was transformed, not by decorations or lights, but by the power of music and the honesty of the performer. The performance built slowly, starting softly and growing into a rich, layered composition. The janitor's fingers moved effortlessly, creating harmony and depth, weaving a story that resonated with everyone. Those who had doubted him, those who had expected a joke, now realized they had underestimated the man sitting before them. He was no longer just a janitor. He was an artist, a storyteller, and a man who had found a way to share his heart without words. The CEO stepped closer, his eyes fixed on the janitor's hands as they moved across the keys. A tear escaped, unnoticed at first, then another. The music spoke directly to him, bypassing the usual barriers of titles and positions. He felt the sincerity of the performance, the years of dedication and the love that had shaped it. This was not entertainment. It was a revelation. The janitor continued, lost in the music, unaware of the profound effect he was having. Each note was a reflection of his life, a testament to resilience and quiet strength. He remembered the nights spent practicing alone, the sacrifices he had made, and the encouragement from his child that had pushed him to keep going. Every emotion, every memory, flowed through his fingers and into the room, creating a shared experience that no one would forget. By the end of the performance, the audience was completely absorbed. When the final note faded, there was a moment of stillness, a collective pause as everyone processed what they had just witnessed. Then, slowly, applause began, soft at first, then growing into a wave of appreciation and admiration. People stood, some clapping vigorously, others wiping away tears, all united in awe of the unexpected brilliance they had experienced. The janitor rose from the piano, his heart pounding but filled with a quiet satisfaction. He looked around the room, seeing the faces of those who had doubted him now full of respect and admiration. The CEO approached him, extending a hand and smiling warmly. "That was incredible," he said simply. "I've never seen anything like it. You have a gift, and it's something we all need to recognize and celebrate." The janitor nodded, humbled by the praise but focused more on the connection he had created. The applause continued, people moving closer to shake his hand, to offer words of appreciation, to express the emotions they had felt. The building, which had seemed ordinary and routine just hours before, now felt alive, vibrant, and transformed by the power of music and the courage to share it. As the crowd slowly dispersed, the janitor remained near the piano for a few moments, allowing himself to savor the experience. He felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had taken a risk, embraced an opportunity, and created a moment that touched the hearts of many. It was a reminder that even those who live quietly, unnoticed, carry within them the potential for extraordinary impact. Later that evening, as he walked home, the janitor reflected on the day. He felt a deep connection not only to the audience but also to his own journey. The performance had been more than just a display of talent. It had been an expression of his life, his struggles, his love, and his resilience. It was proof that passion, when nurtured and shared, has the power to move people in ways nothing else can. The janitor knew that life would continue, with its daily routines and responsibilities, but he also understood that something had changed. The music had reminded him of who he was, of the importance of following one's heart, and of the power of sharing one's gifts with the world. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, a belief that even small, quiet people could make a lasting difference when they embraced their talents and let them shine. That night, as he tucked his child into bed, he shared a quiet smile, knowing that the performance had not just affected the audience, but had also set an example for the next generation. Courage, dedication, and the willingness to embrace one's passions were lessons more important than any words could convey. The janitor had stepped into the light, and though the journey was just beginning, he understood that this was only the start of something truly remarkable. The morning after the performance, the building felt different. The janitor walked through the hallways, noticing subtle changes in the way people looked at him. There was a newfound respect in their eyes, a quiet acknowledgement that he was more than the role he had held for years. Employees who had barely spoken to him before now greeted him warmly, some offering smiles, others sharing encouraging words. The laughter and jokes that had once followed him were gone, replaced by admiration and curiosity. The CEO requested a private meeting to discuss the performance further. The janitor was led into the office, a space he rarely entered, and found the executive waiting with a welcoming smile. There was no pretense, no corporate formality, just genuine interest and respect. The CEO began, "I wanted to personally tell you how much your music moved me yesterday. It was more than just talent. It was honesty, emotion, and a story that touched everyone here. We've all been talking about it, and I think it's important that we recognize what you've done." The janitor listened quietly, feeling both humbled and proud. He had not performed for recognition or praise. He had played because it was part of who he was. Yet hearing these words, seeing the genuine admiration in the CEO's eyes, made him realize the impact of sharing his passion. It was not about showing off or being noticed. It was about connecting, about letting others feel something beyond the ordinary. Over the next few days, people approached him with invitations to play again. There were corporate meetings, small gatherings, and even informal lunch sessions where employees asked him to perform. Each time he felt a mix of nervousness and excitement, but also a sense of purpose. He had discovered that his music could touch people in a way words could not. It created moments of connection, empathy, and joy. The janitor's colleagues who had initially made fun of the idea approached him with apologies and genuine curiosity. "We were wrong to think it would be a joke," one said quietly, lowering their gaze. "You've shown us something incredible." The janitor smiled, accepting the apology graciously. He understood that their initial reaction came from a place of ignorance and assumption, and he did not hold any resentment. Instead, he focused on the positive outcomes, their change of perception and the broader recognition of his talent. In the evenings, after his work was done, the janitor spent time at the piano, exploring new melodies and revisiting old ones. He experimented with compositions, letting his emotions guide him. Each note became a reflection of his life, a mixture of hope, struggle, and triumph. The piano was no longer just an instrument in the lobby. It had become a companion, a channel through which he expressed his deepest feelings. The CEO, impressed by the consistency and sincerity of the janitor's performances, began to consider ways to formally acknowledge him. "Your talent deserves a platform," the CEO said during one discussion. "We want to make sure it is shared and appreciated. Not just here but beyond this building. There are opportunities for you to perform, to teach, and to inspire others. You have something rare, and we want to help you nurture it." This offer left the janitor in deep thought. He had spent years focused solely on work and family, believing that personal dreams were luxuries he could not afford. Now, he was being offered a chance to embrace his passion, to share his gift with a wider audience. It was both exciting and overwhelming. He understood that this was not just about fame or recognition. It was about using his talent to create meaning, to touch lives, and to inspire others. The building staff and employees continued to show respect in everyday ways. Simple gestures, a nod in the hallway, a kind word, or a quiet acknowledgement of his presence, created a sense of belonging and community. The janitor felt that his life had subtly shifted, moving from a routine of unnoticed labor to one of recognized contribution and personal fulfillment. The music had opened doors not only to new opportunities but also to deeper human connections. Meanwhile, word of the janitor's talent reached others beyond the building. Friends of employees, visiting clients, and even local community members learned about the story. Invitations arrived for small performances at nearby events, community gatherings, and local music schools. The janitor considered each invitation carefully, mindful of his responsibilities as a single parent but also aware that these opportunities could change both his life and his child's perspective on following one's dreams. At home, he shared his experiences with his child, who listened with wide-eyed admiration. "I always knew you could do something amazing," the child said softly, hugging him. These moments reinforced the bond between them and showed the janitor that his courage to embrace his talent had ripple effects, inspiring those closest to him. It was a lesson in perseverance, dedication, and the importance of pursuing what brings joy and meaning. The janitor also noticed changes within himself. Confidence, which had been quiet and subdued, began to grow. He felt more comfortable expressing his ideas, more willing to step into new situations, and more connected to his own sense of purpose. The music was not only a gift to others, it was a gift to himself, a way to reclaim a part of life that had been set aside but never forgotten. As weeks passed, the janitor's performances became anticipated events. People from different departments would stop by just to hear him play, clients would schedule meetings around his music, and employees would gather during breaks to experience the melodies that had transformed their perception of the quiet janitor. It was a reminder that talent, when nurtured and shared, has the power to unite people, evoke emotions, and create lasting memories. Despite all the attention, the janitor remained humble. He continued his nightly rounds, performed his cleaning duties with care, and balanced his responsibilities as a single parent. Yet, there was a quiet pride in his step, a sense of purpose that radiated through his work and interactions. People noticed, and the respect and admiration he had earned continued to grow. One day, the CEO approached him again, this time with a more formal offer. "We would like to sponsor you for a series of performances outside the building," the CEO explained. "This is a chance to share your talent with the wider community, to inspire and move people who may never have imagined that someone like you could create something so powerful." The janitor felt a mix of humility, gratitude, and excitement. He realized that life had presented him with an extraordinary opportunity, one that was both a responsibility and a privilege. The janitor reflected on how far he had come. From quiet nights of cleaning and private moments at the piano to performances that moved a room and touched hearts. His journey was a testament to resilience, dedication, and the power of embracing one's passions. He knew that challenges would continue, that balancing work, parenting, and music would require effort. But he also understood that this was a moment worth seizing. Even as recognition grew, the janitor remained grounded. He continued to focus on his child, ensuring that their life remained stable and filled with love. He shared with them the importance of courage, practice, and perseverance. Through his actions, he showed that talent is only valuable when coupled with dedication and humility, and that even in the face of doubt, one can rise to moments of unexpected triumph. By the end of the month, the janitor had performed multiple times, each performance leaving a lasting impact on those who listened. The CEO and staff had witnessed the transformation, not just in how others viewed him, but in how he viewed himself. He had become a symbol of quiet strength, of hidden talent, and of the remarkable possibilities that arise when one dares to step into the light. The janitor knew that his life had been forever changed. Opportunities to perform, to teach, and to inspire had opened before him, and he was ready to embrace them. Yet he also knew that the most important thing was to remain true to himself, to continue expressing his passion with honesty, and to remember the humble beginnings that had shaped him. His journey had shown that recognition and success are most meaningful when they reflect genuine talent, hard work, and the courage to follow one's dreams, no matter how quiet or hidden they may have been for years. Life for the janitor had changed in ways he could not have imagined. The performances, the recognition, and the respect had opened doors, but he remained grounded in his responsibilities and his love for his child. Each morning, he woke early, prepared breakfast, and walked through the hallways of the office building with the same care he always had. The difference was in how people now looked at him, with respect, curiosity, and admiration. He no longer felt invisible. His presence carried weight, not because of a title, but because of the talent, dedication, and honesty he had shared with the world. As the weeks passed, invitations to perform at local events, schools, and community gatherings began to arrive. The janitor considered each opportunity carefully, balancing the need to provide stability for his child with the desire to embrace these new possibilities. He realized that the piano, once a private escape, had become a bridge to the world, a way to touch lives and inspire others. He accepted some invitations, careful to maintain the balance that was so important in his life. During one of the first community events, he arrived at a small local auditorium. The room was filled with families, students, and neighbors who had heard about the janitor, who played like no one expected. As he sat at the piano, he felt a familiar nervousness but also a deep sense of calm. The lights, the audience, and the setting were different from the office lobby, but the feeling was the same. This was a moment to connect, to share, and to let the music speak for him. He began to play softly, letting the notes fill the space. The audience was silent, captivated by the unexpected beauty and depth of the music. The janitor played with emotion, precision, and honesty, just as he had in the office. Each melody carried a story, of struggle, of resilience, of love, and of the quiet victories that make life meaningful. People leaned in, listening intently, some wiping tears from their eyes, others simply absorbing the experience with quiet awe. After the performance, the audience erupted into applause. The janitor stood, feeling a mixture of humility and pride. He realized that these moments were not about recognition or personal glory. They were about connection, about touching lives and sharing something deeply human. The feedback, the smiles, and the words of appreciation were powerful, but what mattered most was the feeling that he had created a shared experience, a memory that would stay with people long after the music ended. At home, he shared the experience with his child, who listened with wide eyes and a growing sense of admiration. "I never knew you could play like that," the child said quietly. The janitor smiled, remembering the years spent playing in secret, practicing alone, and nurturing a passion that had finally found its voice. He realized that these experiences were also lessons for his child, lessons in courage, perseverance, and the importance of following one's passions. The CEO continued to support him, arranging more formal opportunities to perform and even suggesting collaborations with local musicians and schools. The janitor found himself in settings he had never imagined, performing for audiences who appreciated the honesty and emotion of his music. Each experience reinforced the idea that talent, when combined with dedication and humility, has the power to inspire and move people in profound ways. Despite the growing recognition, the janitor remained true to himself. He continued to perform his duties as a janitor with care and dedication, never allowing success to change the way he approached life or the people around him. He understood that respect and admiration were earned not just through talent, but through consistent actions, kindness, and humility. His life became a balance of work, parenting, and music, each aspect supporting and enriching the others. As time went on, he began to explore composing his own music. The melodies that had once been improvisation now took shape as complete pieces, reflecting his life story and emotions. He experimented with rhythm, harmony, and structure, finding joy in the creative process. These compositions became a way to document his journey, to share his perspective, and to leave a legacy of passion and perseverance. Community members, colleagues, and even strangers reached out to express how his music had impacted them. Letters, emails, and verbal messages shared stories of hope, inspiration, and emotional resonance. The janitor realized that the music he had once kept private had the power to create positive change, to inspire others to pursue their own passions, and to remind people of the beauty that exists in simple, honest expression. One evening, after a performance at a community center, the janitor sat quietly at the piano, reflecting on the journey that had led him here. He thought about the long nights of cleaning, the sacrifices made for his child, and the small moments of encouragement that had kept him moving forward. He understood that every step, every struggle, and every act of dedication had prepared him for this moment. The music was not just an escape. It was a manifestation of resilience, hope, and the human spirit. His child often asked to join him at the piano, sitting nearby while he played. These moments became bonding experiences, a way to share not only music but also values, lessons, and life experiences. The janitor saw the joy and curiosity in his child's eyes, realizing that the love for creativity and the courage to follow one's heart were being passed down. He understood that the impact of his journey extended beyond the audience. It reached the next generation. The janitor's life continued to evolve. He accepted more performances, explored new musical collaborations, and balanced his work and family life with growing confidence. Opportunities to teach, mentor, and inspire others became part of his journey. He understood that success was not about recognition alone, but about using his talents to enrich the lives of others, to create moments of connection, and to remind people of the power of persistence and passion. Through it all, he remained humble and grounded. The piano, once a private sanctuary, had become a bridge to the world, a tool for communication and connection. He appreciated the experiences, the people he met, and the impact he had on audiences, but he never allowed these things to define him. Instead, he let the music guide him, keeping his purpose clear and his values intact. Years later, the janitor looked back on that first performance, the moment that had begun as a joke but turned into a life-changing event. He understood that courage, passion, and the willingness to embrace opportunity had transformed his life in ways he could never have predicted. The music had not only changed how others saw him, it had changed how he saw himself. He had discovered the power of his own voice, the beauty of dedication, and the strength that comes from staying true to one's heart. As he continued to play, teach, and inspire, the janitor remained focused on what truly mattered: his child, his community, and the joy of sharing music with the world. The performances, the recognition, and the opportunities were meaningful, but the deepest fulfillment came from knowing that he had followed his passion, overcome doubt, and turned a quiet, unseen talent into a force that touched countless lives. In the end, the janitor's journey was a testament to the human spirit, the power of resilience, and the extraordinary impact of embracing one's gifts fully and fearlessly.